Welcome to The Forecast, a podcast by Rain the Growth Agency. I'm your host, Morgan Willis. On each episode of The Forecast, we'll speak with guests about advertising, media, marketing trends, and sometimes we might get into some other fun too. We'll close each episode with our guest's forecast for the future of their area of expertise. Today, I'll be speaking with Shuree Jones. Shuree is an expert on the ever-changing landscape of social media. And she is Rain's own group director of paid social and influencer media. We've invited her onto the podcast today to speak to social media trends, including TikTok's uncertain future after the platform was banned in the United States and then unbanned 2 days later at the start of this year. Let's see what Shuree has to say about the future of TikTok and more. Hi, Shuree.
Hi,
How are you?
doing well. How are you?
I am very good. Well, this week and the past couple of weeks have been a big few weeks for social media, right? With TikTok being banned for, 12 hours and then
About 12
immediately
hours.
coming back to us. What is your take on all of this? How should advertisers react to all this volatility around TikTok?
Well, the number one reaction that we want to avoid is panic. We know that social media platforms in the past 5 years have been a little bit volatile, but the smart advertisers will look at consumption and look at their overall budget and go where their audience is. That doesn't change if TikTok were to be banned. We've got a 75-day extension, so that's around the end of the quarter. If TikTok were to be banned, I would just advise advertisers and will be advising, our clients to look at where their consumption is the greatest. So if your objective of your campaign is to build awareness, look for the platforms with the highest reach potential. If the objective is to drive sales, look for the channels that are working the hardest for you and that are most efficient in driving a purchase.
Now, if TikTok is banned, let's say after this extension window, or it goes away in some capacity, do you think there's a platform that will largely take over its user base?
It remains to be seen, but probably the closest that we can see in terms of consumption and how TikTok really drives discovery, drives entertainment, is a really big hub for creators. All of those things really fall in line with Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. I will say that there's not a, one-to-one match for what TikTok does. Really their power on the consumer side and on the advertiser side is really in their algorithm and how advanced it is. We haven't really seen, that algorithm match in Reels or in YouTube Shorts, but those would be two places that I would look to reallocate if you're looking at, a TikTok ban.
What do you think of these other apps that people have been using, sort of in protest of the ban? There's RedNote. I think there have been some others that people have flocked to. Do you think that those apps are going to see long-term growth, or is this more of a fad?
It really depends on how they react in this next few months or the few months after a TikTok ban. One of the things that TikTok did really well during COVID was react very quickly in development. So they put all of their, energy into developing the algorithm before they even put energy into building out an ads platform. So that's what I would expect to see if any of these, apps have long-term staying power. Is you really have to invest in that user experience. I didn't see it in Threads. I don't really see it in Blue Sky, but I definitely don't see it in RedNote quite yet. But they are ones to watch. And one of the things that we've communicated to clients is if you are interested in these platforms, we will obviously be aware of them, up on them, looking at consumer trends within each of these new platforms. But if you're interested in them, build out an organic presence first and really dip a toe in, have a really tight brand communication strategy, a really tight brand social voice, and really see what, is out there, start communicating with your audience one-to-one. And then as, ad products develop, we'll bring, opportunities to you. But if you're interested in, a new platform, don't necessarily put all of your eggs in a brand new basket. Test organically and see if your audience is truly there.
Moving on a little bit to influencer trends. I know this is sort of, surrounding organic media. It's not necessarily directly paid media, but can you tell us a little bit more about how brands are using influencers to, kind of get ahead of the algorithm to get, more reach out of these platforms?
Yeah, getting ahead of the algorithm is a good way to put it. One of the best uses of influencers now in 2025 is really using influencer content to push into niche audiences. So, as paid social marketers, our ability to target on social platforms has really been squeezed. iOS 14 has really, removed a lot of the targeting parameters that we were used to. So we've pivoted to leaning on the algorithm and a volume of creative to really find our audience, communicate well to them, and serve a paid media objective. In that same vein, creators can really get at that content piece much quicker than a piece of brand creative could, much more niche than piece of brand creative might want to lean into. And it's a really ripe area for testing. So if you want to test into a new audience, instead of, building out a suite of brand creative, have a few creators that can build speaking to that audience and see if there's viability there. I think the key with influencers of any size is to really make sure that there's a natural partnership. So authenticity is really key. And a lot of creators are more aware of that than they used to be. So they're not really willing to take partnerships where it doesn't really make sense. My own brand as a creator might not mesh with a client's brand, and that's okay. But there's no shortage of creators now. It's really a creator economy. So brands should really be looking for natural fits. If you, like a certain creator in your personal life, but it doesn't necessarily fit with your brand, that's not really going to work for their audience or the brand audience.
I think when people, when they think about influencers, they often think about influencers with 1, 2, 3, 4+ million followers,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know that some brands have been experimenting with using much smaller
Mm-hmm.
influencers. I think they call them micro influencers. They use
Right.
these influencers who have, maybe only 1,000, but align really well with their brand in order to
Mm-hmm.
get their message out.
Yeah, and that's micro influencers and nano influencers, so even smaller. Micro, I want to say, is in the 20,000 follower range, and nano would be anyone smaller than 5,000 followers. Those influencers really connect super well with their audiences. One thing that we've seen is that the most of the time, the wider a following grows, you start to see engagement dip. And, it doesn't mean that someone with 2 million followers has no engagement. That's of course not true. But someone with 5,000 followers who has a 6% engagement rate, that's a really attractive content creator, because when they're putting out a piece of content, their audience is engaging, their audience is responding, and that's who I would want to partner with. Yes, we would likely put that into a paid media environment so that reach would grow. But if they're talking to a niche audience that I want to connect with, that's the content that I want. And a lot of times, creators, especially with niche audiences, can build content for them much better than a brand would be able to. They know that audience, they speak to that audience, the audience speaks to them. They know how to build a piece of content that will connect.
Can you tell me about yourself? Tell me about your career path and
Sure.
why social media?
Yeah. Well, I started out in the content department. I wanted to be a writer. I was a journalism major in college. But I sort of knew even back then that maybe, newspapers were not going to be the career with the most longevity. So I did look for, digital spaces. And I had considered advertising. That was a part of sort of my suite in college. But once I saw sort of social and what the consumer side of social was doing, married with the ad side, it just was an immediate fit. It really pushes that sort of consumer behavior piece that I find really interesting. The creative piece and marrying with audiences and targeting really fits the that creative piece that it's not necessarily writing, but it's definitely using kind of psychographic type um, attributes to then like marry with advertising. So I think that's what drew me to it, and being a part of strategy, right? So when paid social was not an assumed piece of media, or piece of media planning, really being able to push into the growth of paid social has been really exciting too. And that kind of itches my business side, you know? So it really all is exactly where I should be, where I want to be. I've thought about expanding and going, you know, more maybe digital, learning about digital video. I'm super interested in linear, but it's much more I want to learn about it. And paid social, I just have this drive of I know, you know, what we should be doing. And it just marries so many interesting pieces for me.
Yeah, that's your passion. I think your story, about you being a journalism major is so similar to many of us in the advertising field. I was a journalism major. I met many others who were journalism majors. And I think advertising, and especially social media, where you have so much freedom with creative, really gives you a chance to be creative, to use strategy to inform what you do, to, as you were saying, there's a little bit of psychology involved in it. So it really is this big mix of different subjects all in one job.
It is. It is. And it's, as I said before, I've always worked at agency. And so it truly is never dull. I mean, you really are, you have new challenges, and what worked one month may not work so well the next month. And being a part of an integrated agency is also really valuable because I've learned so much about media. And like I said, the linear side of the business is so interesting to me. Digital video is so interesting to me, but we also have an amazing creative team. And so to be able to pick their brains about what can we do for iterations for this, and to see what the creative team comes back with. And, you know, you maybe gave them, you know, 2 paragraphs on a brief. Like, I kind of want to see this, and to have them come back with these ideas that are just incredible is so exciting and fun. And we have the research department at Rain that has just blown me away. We recently, you know, partnered with the research team to look into how seniors, so the 60 plus set, consume creative on social. It really was born out of this question that I had. We have a few senior focused clients, and it was this question of, you know, how do seniors view social creative? We know that seniors are on social platforms. That's nothing new, but how do they consume creative? Is it, you know, visual driven? Are they more likely to have sound on or sound off? And I just wasn't convinced that we could lean on, you know, the overarching best practices that we know about social creative. So we tapped the research team, and it really was a question to them like, is there anything here? And they said, yeah, let's, you know, put a study out in the field. And they did. And we got, you know, the results back last week. And I mean, it's incredible what they found. And I'm really excited to write something about it, or, you know, of course, share it with our clients. But that's part of, you know, being at an agency like Rain, where the opportunity to learn is, you know, vast, and you're still, again, you know, scratching the itch of that creative piece, being a journalism major, but you're also learning so much about media, so much about creative, and so forth.
Shuri, what would be your forecast for the next year? What do you think will be the biggest happenings, the biggest trends for social media?
I probably have 5 of those, but I think maybe the major 3, AI is still going to dominate. AI is really, and when we talk about AI, it's nothing necessarily new to social platforms. It's something that social platforms have had to use, like I said, with the privacy parameters that have been squeezed. AI is just going to keep growing. So those opportunities to make more creative, because creative has become so important in the social space, AI is going to have a hand in that. Smaller platforms, smaller social platforms like LinkedIn, they're all going to have AI options now for advertisers. So I think that's going to become not a nice to have or not a let's test it. It's going to become the norm for advertisers. So that's definitely something we see this year. Another thing is definitely pushing more into creators. You had mentioned micro influencers and nano influencers. I think that's going to be probably the biggest growing segment in the creator space. I think that is going to not become let's test it. It's going to become a line item, right, in the budget. Let's make room for influencer content. And finally, I think social shopping is going to become major as well. We saw TikTok shops just really exploded in the past 2 years. And even if TikTok does, have to go through with this ban, or if it has to, be sold and kind of partner with a US company, I still think that shopping is going to grow on other platforms. And that social piece married with the creator piece is really going to become how brands can sell with immediacy on social.
Thank you, Shuree. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
The Forecast is powered by Rain the Growth Agency, a leading independent advertising agency. I'm your host, Morgan Willis. Art design is by Eric Hernandez, production by Beatrice Livioco. The show is edited by Morgan Willis and Eric Hernandez. Thank you to Shuree Jones from Rain the Growth Agency for coming onto the podcast. Follow along with the show on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy listening to stay in the loop. We'll see you next time.